And then we come to present day 2020, and we're going to talk about what hoarding is. And so, again, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section, and we would gladly come back and answer those for you. But I did just want to say, so hoarding, if you don't get anything from this series, is that hoarding is a mental disorder. And Dr. Hannan, I'm sure you've had to deal with this where people don't recognize it as a mental disorder, or they just assume that people should just either get over it and clean up.
Yeah, and we wish it was sort of that simple, but it's obviously not. That the idea of letting go of things or even walking away from something. So if you're at a store or a tag sale, it causes an intense emotion in people that have been diagnosed with hoarding disorder. So it's not just this, I'm just too lazy to throw it out. Like there's a real intense response at the thought of letting go of something.
Right, that emotional attachment that and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Because again, we're talking about a mental disorder, not a lifestyle choice. It's not as easy as it may be for, Dr. Hannan or myself to go into a store and see something on sale and say, no, I'll just leave it. There's this really visceral, gut-wrenching reaction to, making that decision to keep it or to let it go. Because there's this emotional attachment to things that, if you don't have a hoarding disorder, doesn't seem to make any sense. But that's why it makes sense, because you don't have the hoarding disorder. You can make that decision, where someone with this disorder struggles. They really, really struggle with making those decisions. And that leads into my next point, is that they have difficulty discarding items that have little or no value. And again, it may be little or no value to you or to me or to Dr. Hannan, but to them, it has intense value. And I don't know, Dr. Hannan, have you had the experience where you're working with a client? And I always use the example of the first China set that most of us get. And I don't mean the one that's real. That's the empty mayonnaise jars, or the I can't believe it's not butter containers that most of us would just literally discard. But, I have clients who have intense feelings and takes, hours and days to make decisions about letting those go, where most people will say, well, it's just trash, or you can get a bowl. Have you had that experience?
Oh, absolutely. And, for most of us, it comes down to like this, like you said, it doesn't make any sense. Just let go of it. For people that are struggling with hoarding disorder, there may be a lot of reasons that are holding on to those things. And those things may, when you're looking at things like mayonnaise jars, for some people may come down to financial reasons.
Absolutely.
What do I need it? What if I need it for something? And all of us would think about, but you have so many other ways to use it. But for some people, again, there's that intense emotion that if I do let this go, then I might be wasting money, or I could be wasting some type of resource. Can be connections to the items. Like if I just let it go, that's disrespectful to the item, the materials, like I'm not being careful of the environment. So there's a lot that goes into the way they think about it. It's not a healthy way of thinking, but they are really engaged with the idea of letting something go. They're just struggling to get over that barrier of their internal experience to make that move. That for us, most people, it's very simple. We don't have any kind of emotional connection to it.
That is an excellent point, because I know in my experience, if I remember working with one lady in particular, biggest heart you ever wanted to meet, just really sweet person. And her difficulty in letting go of things was, well, if someone else, will it have a good home? And again, we were talking about inanimate objects that didn't have any feeling or emotion, but her thing was, will it have a good home? Where is it going to go? If it goes into the trash, then again, like you said, that's wasteful. And most of us would say, well, I've already spent the money on it, so I'm not going to be able to get it back. But in her situation, it was in addition to, being wasteful, also, is it going to go to a good cause? Or again, where is it going? Or someone else, I always get this one, but someone else could use it.
Yes.
Right. That's the one right there. But I'm saving this for my daughter, for my son, I'm going to give it to someone else.
Yeah, and then sometimes people bring those things to their house without even necessarily a purpose, but somebody somewhere might need this. I found it. It was on the side of the road, or they were selling it just for 50 cents. That's such a great deal. We could use it. And if I didn't get it, what if we needed it 5 years from now and now it costs $10? what a waste of money. So there again, there's that even that idea of this is a right move to make, not just for now, but for the future.
Right. So they're thinking far in advance, which is difficult because we only have today. And so not only do you have to deal with the fact of, like you said, the money part of it, the emotional part of it, you have to deal with the planning part of it of I may need it. And it's really difficult to tell someone that they won't need something in 5 years because none of us knows what you will need. So yeah, that is a common thing that we have to deal with when you're working with somebody with a hoarding disorder.
And I think one of the tricks is, to a certain degree, they can be right. Like they can find themselves being right a lot of the times. So if I've got 50 items here that I've accumulated, something goes wrong. Somebody calls me up like, hey, do you have an extra screwdriver? I absolutely do. And it's like, wow, my friend was in trouble. The storm was coming. They had no screwdriver to fix up what they needed to do. And I got them that screwdriver, and thank goodness I had it.
Yes.
And they don't think about, the other 49 things that you haven't used, or there was probably a neighbor on the other side of their house that could have had a screwdriver too. Like that, but it gets to that one moment in time can be really reinforcing for those beliefs.
Right. And when that moment comes and they get to tell you, I told you so, that's
we get told I told you so quite often.
Right. You're like, yeah, I told you that would come in handy. And it's funny. And again, we'll talk about our time on Hoarders. If you remember that the young lady the woman that we were working with, her son had mentioned something about her having, if you needed 20 screwdrivers, she had them, but she couldn't find any of them. So, you go into that too, of having them, maybe not needing them, but when you need them, you can't find them. So it's an entire dance. But yeah, when that one moment is solidified in their mind, and that moment that I told you so, it goes on a sign forever. I told you I would need this. And I appreciate that you mentioned, helping the neighbor, because again, most of these people are just really giving and wanting to help and thinking that they're help, not seeing so much the difficulty that they're causing themselves because they're thinking that they're helping so many other people. And they are in some ways, but, they are bearing the brunt of the disorder. Yeah. So that was interesting. The screwdriver. I think that's probably why it came into my head. I was thinking about her. So, yeah. So we talk about, you mentioned something about the load, the weight load. Now, my brother is a 30-year career retired firefighter. And so you can imagine some days around the table that we were talking, well, what did you do today? Well, what did you do today? Now, he ran into buildings that people were running out of because they were on fire. And I, walked into houses that people didn't want to get in because, it was hoarded. So it was quite the talk at Thanksgiving. But we were talking about that, the living conditions being possibly dangerous or unsanitary and cluttered and non-functioning. And you brought up the load. Yeah. Imagine, you're sitting in your living room and in your bedroom there, half a ton or so, and your house wasn't made for that. Or, carrying along with the firefighter story, he's, my brother told me a lot of stories of sadly people who would perish because the firefighters couldn't get to them. They couldn't get past the hoard, or, and we'll talk about this a little later, the windows of the doors were blocked, or they just couldn't get to them because there was just, they were impeded because, the house wasn't functioning as it should. And the unsanitary part, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's one of the myths that we're going to talk about. People think that, every hoarded home is, filthy, dirty, urine, feces, dead fluffy, can't find the dog. The person is sitting there in soiled clothes, your teeth are missing, and, all of that. So they bring out the worst in what they think someone with a hoarding disorder looks like or lives like. Now, we don't deny that, of course, in a hoarded home, it's likely unsanitary, but it doesn't mean that it always has to be. So talk about the living conditions that you've possibly seen.
Yeah, I mean, it really can vary. I mean, you certainly do see those cases where it is really bad, and you have things where the conditions are not healthy, where the breeding conditions are terrible. Like if you've got animals and you're not cleaning up after them, you've got ammonia buildup, which can be an irritant to your lungs. You've got animals in there. You don't know if there's fleas. There's other kind of diseases that can be brought in if you got wild animals sometimes get into the homes. But that's not always the case. And
Exactly.
it really sort of depends on what might be driving that particular person. So within any type of psychiatric disorder, there are always differences in how people will display that. So if you were to
Right.
look at our manual of mental disorders, it's not like here are the 4 criteria, you meet all 4 of these. No, it's like here are the 10, you need to meet 4 or 5
Exactly.
out of the 10. So
Yes.
you can have people that have very varying presentations. And so I've certainly worked with people where you know, if you probably would have no idea that
Mhm.
hoarding was a problem, where what they may be holding on to are things like um, old books, old newspapers, old clothing, and
Yeah.
it may even be neat, right? And what I
Exactly.
say by neat is like they're in
Mhm.
piles, they're put away, but there's so much the clutter keeps, they may have like bureaus and they kind of keep encroaching. They got many bureaus or they've got
Mhm.
piles of things where you do have to walk around things, but there may be um, not necessarily the things that are going to be like decaying in the house. I mean, I think you always tend to have a problem with things like watching out for things like dust and mold. When you have that
Right.
much, you can't always keep track of everything. But it's not always going to be things where you have like rotting, decaying food or animals in the home that shouldn't be there or that have passed away. Sometimes it is normal things that a lot of us hold on to. We might hold on to books that we read 20 years ago, and there's always something about like, well, you got to keep these books. They're great books.
You
I
can't
read it.
throw away "Are You There, God Is Me, Margaret." You just can't do
Right.
it. It's not
And
allowed.
yeah, and so some people that have hoarding disorder may have lots of those different things that most of us will hold on to, but they hold on to a lot more clothing. Like, what if I,
Mhm.
could fit into these clothes one day, or I could use them, or someone could use them. It could be, knickknacks they picked up over time. It could be things that they're collecting because I think one of the things with hoarding disorder too is it doesn't always have to be things that are worthless. Sometimes
Exactly.
you can have people that are um, collectors, and I think the one show that we were on, woman had things that were of value, but that
Mhm.
didn't make it not a problem of hoarding disorder. What you can see for some people is they hold on to things that may be valuable, but they can't turn them around. They may
Mm.
not keep them in conditions where that allows the value to go up. They may actually be going down, and they don't use them in a way that allows them to use the home, but also engage in this hobby or activity that they really enjoy.
Absolutely. You brought up some great points. So, and he's dispelled a myth before we even got into it that hoarding doesn't always look like you might see in pictures or even on television. And, because someone can, be fairly what we would call organized. But as he said, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I remember one case where I was working with a couple, and the husband would collect bins, the storage bins,
Mm,
and so everything looked, neat until you walked in and you saw that there were just bins, almost like Legos,
mm.
just bins everywhere. And over the years they would encroach until they came into that small space that we call goat trails. So that, they were
Yeah.
not, their home wasn't functioning anymore. And we're going to talk about the need for your home to function as part of the diagnosis. Actually, we can go into that right now, since I mentioned the goat trails. Is
Well, one other point I want to make, just kind of following what you were just
Sure.
saying, that sometimes it can be deceiving. I recall being in a couple of homes where they almost just changed the structure of the home to fit the clutter. So,
Yeah.
like in the basement area, you walk down, you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. Then you open up what looks like a closet, which you might have in a basement, a small closet, and it's a
Right.
really huge store area with stuff piled in. Um,
Absolutely.
and I've seen people build like a closet into a room where you're like, there's a closet over there, but now there's a closet over there.
Right.
So it kept it out of sight,
Uh-huh.
but it was you're no longer using the home in a way that it was initially intended for.
And that is a perfect point. So thank you again for taking the time to stop by my channel. And before you leave, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. Do me one other favor, tell at least 5 people you know about my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And if no one has told you today how awesome you are, I want you to know that you are absolutely, positively awesome. Take care. God bless. Bye.